Welcome to the Construction Leading Edge, the podcast dedicated to helping construction professionals become better entrepreneurs and leaders. Now, let's get started. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Construction Leading Edge, the site and podcast dedicated to helping construction professionals become better entrepreneurs and leaders. My name is Todd DeWalt, and today we are going to talk about decision making. And if you want to find out more about this topic or see the notes from this call, please go to constructionleadingedge.com/011. This is episode 11, 10 Keys to Decision Making. Now let's start with a couple of quotes from some smart folks in business. The first one comes from Jim Rohn, and he says, "It doesn't matter which side of the fence you get off sometimes. What matters most is getting off. You cannot make progress without making decisions." Peter Drucker has the next quote, who's one of the most well-known thought leaders when it comes to leadership, and he says this: "Whenever you see a successful business, someone once made a courageous decision." And finally, Michael Rawls says the following: "The greatest accomplishment began as a decision once made, and often a difficult one." So today we're going to talk about 10 keys to effective decision making, and this is a very important topic for leaders. So the first key that we're going to talk about, key number 1, is this: the most important decisions are often about who, not necessarily about what, when, or how. Now this may come as a surprise to you because as contractors we're all about the what and the how, the strategies, the tactics. But sometimes we need to take a step back and look at the who. Because as a leader, we need to understand that the people that we're leading are often the most valuable resource we have. And if we skip over those people and move right to the what or the how, then we're missing out on one of the best resources we have available to us. In times of uncertainty, which contractors are always faced with times of uncertainty, good leaders know that they need to be surrounded by smart and trustworthy people. And I've got a good example. This comes directly from an interview with Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great. And he talks about the subject of how important it is to focus on the who before the what or the how. And I'll just read part of an interview with Jim Collins. And he says, "Let's take the story of a company heading into a very uncertain world." He's talking about Wells Fargo in the late 1970s. At that time, everybody knows that the storm of deregulation is going to hit, but nobody knows precisely how it's going to shake out. When is it going to hit? What exact form is it going to take? What impact will it have on the banking industry? They didn't know at the time. So Dick Cooley, who was the chief executive of Wells Fargo at the time, he was very clear with Jim Collins and his team on what he did. Dick Cooley said, in essence, "I did not know what we were going to have to do to prevail through deregulation because it was an uncertain set of contingencies. There were too many of them. But I did know that if I spent the 1970s building a team of the most capable executives possible, they would figure out what to do when deregulation finally hit." You see, Dick Cooley couldn't lay down a plan for what was going to happen because he didn't know what was going to happen. So his decision was actually a bunch of decisions about getting the people who could deal with whatever deregulation turned out to be. So faced with a very uncertain time, knowing that his entire industry was going to change, he didn't get bogged down in the what or the how, but he surrounded himself with extremely capable people who he was confident could figure out the what and the how when it finally came down to it. So key number 1 is we need to understand that the most important decisions that we need to make are often the who decisions, not the what or the when or the how. Key number 2 in decision making: be comfortable saying, "I don't know." Now, some of you probably just cringed when you heard that, and that sounds like a sign of weakness. Red flags were popping up. But the best leaders will tell you that they are very comfortable asking a lot of questions and taking the posture of "I don't know." Because what this does is this willingness to ask questions and say, I don't know, puts you in a posture of being open to others and leveraging the resources that you have at your disposal, being the people on your team. Another thing that Jim Collins says when it comes to this key of saying I don't know and asking questions is increase the ratio of questions to statements that you make. Again, increase the ratio of questions to statements that come out of your mouth. So if you find yourself constantly giving directives, making statements, making declarations, never asking questions, he suggests a ratio of at least 1-to-1, probably 2-to-1 when it comes to questions to statements. So ask lots of questions of your people and ask twice as many questions as you make statements. The next thing he talks about when it comes to decision making is that the key to good decisions is real debate or conflict. The best companies engage in a process that he outlines as conflict. There's some issue that needs to be resolved. There's a situation that comes up. Then there's often heated debate by the team. In some cases, binders being thrown across the room and names being called, voices being raised, passionate, heated debate about this topic to get everybody's feedback on the situation. And then there's an executive decision that's made, but very rarely was there a unanimous decision. So there's this process of conflict, heated debate, and then an executive decision is made that is followed by a unified effort to follow that decision. Again, it was not necessarily, very few of the biggest decisions that corporations studied by Jim Collins made were unanimous decisions, but the people on the team unified behind that decision and they went forward with it without sabotaging it behind the scenes, which we have probably seen. But again, the most effective leaders understand the importance of asking questions, being open and saying, I don't know, engaging their team in healthy debate, but then moving forward with the decision. Key number 3 is to take the long view. This is about looking at not just the next quarter, but to look at the next quarter century or even further. I've seen in my own career, I've seen companies make decisions that were based on padding the numbers for that quarter, moving revenue, pulling revenue from future quarters in, pushing expenses off just to make that quarter look better on paper, which it's frankly just a game that doesn't mean anything. So take the long view when you make your decisions. Don't necessarily look at what's going to make for a better quarter, but take the long view and look at what's going to be the best thing for your company over the next quarter century. What's going to be the best thing for your career over the next quarter century, not just the next 90 days. Number 4, this is a little bit of a paradigm shift. And so key number 4 is it's not necessarily about the huge decisions. It's not the go or no-go on D-Day, the decision that Eisenhower made to pull the trigger on the Normandy invasion. Very rarely will the fate of your career, the fate of your company, rest on one big decision that had to be made. Jim Collins says it this way. He says, the big decisions are not like 60 out of 100 points. He says they're more like 6 out of 100 points, maybe even 0.6 out of 100 points. There are pivotal decisions, the go or no-go on D-Day, but it's really the stream of decisions over time, brilliantly executed, that accounts for the greatest outcomes. So again, Jim Collins is saying it's not about the once or twice a year huge pivotal decisions that companies make. It's about the stream of decisions made every day, every week, brilliantly executed, that account for the great outcomes of the companies that he found to be very successful. So this requires a bit of a mindset shift. I've been around some folks who are, they're all about the big decision. They're looking for the home run, so to speak. And I'm a former baseball player, so the analogy that I think of is the guys that are only concerned about the one or two big decisions. They're like the closer, the pitcher that comes in to get the last out. They need to throw 3 or 6 or 10 pitches to close it out, and then they go back and they sit in the bullpen the rest of the time. It's more about being the catcher than it is about being the closer. I believe what Jim Collins is saying here is it's more about being the catcher, the guy who is calling the pitches every day in the trenches, making every play, catching every ball, every day, day in, day out. Then it's more about being that guy, making small decisions and executing on those decisions every day than it is about being the closer, the guy who makes 3 or 4 pitches, or in our case, 3 or 4 big decisions, and then goes away. Key number 5, the next few keys I want to talk about are really some practical strategies or tactics when it comes time to make decisions. So the first things we talked about were more mindset or paradigms we need to operate in. So just to review, 1, the first key is the most important decisions are not necessarily about what, when, or how, but who. Number 2, we need to get comfortable saying, I don't know. And we need to be comfortable asking questions. Number 3 is taking the long view. Number 4 was it's not necessarily about the huge decisions, but about, as Jim Collins says, the stream of decisions brilliantly executed. So now that we've got our mindset taken care of, now we have a decision that needs to be made. We have an issue that comes up, and it feels at least like we need to make a decision. So key number 5, the first decision you need to make is, when does this decision need to be made? In other words, the question you need to ask is, when does the risk profile change? When does the situation change? So, for example, if you need to make a decision on whether or not you bid on a project, that risk profile changes on bid day. There's a very real, tangible deadline, and you have to make a decision at least by the bid date, preferably sooner than that, whether or not you're going to bid on that project. The example that I've heard was that, let's say you were diagnosed with cancer and you needed to make a decision. Let's say it was determined that you had cancer in your left foot, and one of the treatment options included chemotherapy, radiation, or amputation. Well, the first question you would ask would be, when do I need to make a decision? Do I have hours? Do I have days? Do I have weeks? Do I have months? And that question, the answer to that question will determine whether you need to amputate today or do you need to try some other treatment options. So you need to ask yourself, when does my risk profile change? When do I need to make this decision? The next decision to be made is, who needs to make this decision? Do you need to make this decision? Does it need to be delegated? Are there other people that are better equipped to make the decision? Are there other people who need to be involved in this decision? A lot of times as the leader, we feel like we're the only one who can make decisions, the only one that should make decisions, but frankly, that's just wrong. So there are what I've heard called the 3 C's that you need to consider when you ask yourself who needs to make this decision. So the first C is this a communal decision? In other words, is this something where the company or the team needs to vote on and make the decision as a team? So some examples would be your company health insurance policy. You need to get buy-in from your employees because it will affect them, and it may or may not make that big of an impact to the organization as a whole, but it's very important that everybody involved have a say in the decision. Another one would be something like the company Christmas party or the company picnic. Get the consensus, get the communal decision and take a vote, get feedback, and let the group make the decision. It draws on the resources that you have available, and it gets people engaged and involved in the process, and it will make your life easier. The second C is consensus. This is a case where the group, either a part of the group or a team or the entirety of your team, gets together and discusses options as a team. They get some consensus and make a decision either as a team or make some recommendations to the leader, and the leader makes the final call. These are situations where they're more strategic in nature, and you need to have buy-in from your team, and there needs to be alignment. It goes back to the Wells Fargo situation where big decisions needed to be made, the right people were brought on board, and then there was healthy debate, but at the end of the day, it wasn't necessarily a unanimous decision, but there was a significant amount of discussion and debate that went into the topic, and then the executive or a smaller group of executives made the decision. Then the final C, so the first C is a communal decision, the second C is consensus, the final C is the CEO decides. This is a situation where the Titanic is heading for an iceberg, the CEO just makes a decision, we need to turn to avert a crisis, to avoid disaster. There's no time for getting a communal discussion going. There's no time to gather consensus. The CEO just needs to decide. Things have to happen to avoid damage or loss or something like that, and the leader just makes the decision to pull the trigger and go forward. Next, step number 7, key number 7 in decision making. Once we've got our mindset straight and we've checked the risk profile and we've decided when a decision needs to be made, we've come up with a deadline, we have gotten the right people involved in making the decision, now it's time to gather information. The most important part, one of the most important parts of the decision-making process is to gather information, put together data, and study the topic, research the topic, talk to your people, talk to vendors, talk to mentors, talk to references. Let's say we're talking about we need to make a decision on a hire. Then check references. No matter how badly you think you need this person on board next week, make the decision that you're going to give yourself a couple of weeks before you make a hire. Talk to former employees, talk to references, bring the person in, send them away, bring them back. Take the time to gather as much information as you can and put it all in a format that you can keep track of it, and you can look at the entirety of the information that you've gathered, and then gather information until it's time to make a decision. So key number 8, once you've gathered the information, one of the most valuable things that I've found is to start listing out all the potential options. Look at the worst case scenario, look at the best case scenario, start listing out options. If you hang around me very much, when there's a decision to be made, you'll hear me say, well, I see 3 options, or I see 4 options, or give me options. Tell me what this thing may look like. Start listing out options, because that transforms and translates all this information that you've gathered into potential courses of action that you can take. So list out options, put them all on a piece of paper, put them in a Google document, put them on your iPhone, put them somewhere, but write all these options out on one piece of paper so you can see them all together and prepare yourself to make a decision. Now, this is one of the more interesting things that I've found when it came to studying the topic of leadership. So key number 9 is what Colin Powell would call the 40-70 rule. Again, this is the 40-70 rule. and I'll just read to you what I found from that. Colin Powell has a rule of thumb about making tough decisions. He says that every time you face a tough decision, you should have no less than 40% and no more than 70% of the information you need to make the decision. If you make a decision with less than 40% of the information you need, you're shooting from the hip and you'll make too many mistakes. The second part of the decision-making rule, this 40-70 rule, is what surprises many leaders. They think that they need more than 70% of the information before they can make a decision. But Colin Powell says if you get more than 70% of the information you need to make the decision, then the opportunity has usually passed and someone else has beaten you to the punch. A key element that supports Colin Powell's rule is the notion that intuition is what separates the great leaders from the average ones. Intuition is what allows us to make tough decisions well, but many of us ignore our gut. We want certainty that we're making the right decision, but that's just not possible. In Colin Powell's experience, people who want certainty in their decisions end up reporting to someone else and not leading. So remember the 40-70 rule. Get no less than 40% of the information that you think you need to make a decision, but get no more than 70% of the information that you think you need. And the reality is you will never have 100% of the information that you think you need to make a decision. But that's okay. The 70% rule leverages the intuition of the leader, that gut instinct that often bridges the gap between the 70% and the right decision. So key number 9 is the 40-70 rule. Key number 10, so we've got our mindset, we've checked our risk profile, we've decided when the decision needs to be made, we've put a date on the calendar, we've gotten the right people involved, we've gathered information, we've listed all the options, we're taking advantage of the 40-70 rule from Colin Powell. Number 10, it's just time to pull the trigger. Put a date on the calendar, gather the information, work toward that date, and then when it's time to pull the trigger, just pull the trigger. Don't get caught in the paralysis of analysis, as some people would call it. Make a decision. And understand that unless you're making some sort of life-altering decision, which we're not really talking about today, but if we're talking about a business decision or a personnel decision, maybe you're trying to put together a budget for your company, maybe you're bidding on a project, making some decision on a vendor. These are not life-ending decisions. These are decisions that can be made and you can course correct later on. But just trust the process, list all the options, use the 40-70 rule, pull the trigger, and then course correct afterward if you need to. I've had so many instances where either I've put together a budget for something or I've been handed a budget and then some unforeseen situation has come up and I've been able to make adjustments, course correct, negotiate a better deal, value engineering something out of it to make it work. So just know that very few decisions are once and for all decisions that you have to make in our line of business. Fortunately, we're not heart surgeons. We're not dealing with people's lives on a day-to-day basis. So don't get so bogged down in the paralysis of analysis that you don't make decisions. And what I've found is when I've got so many open issues that I haven't made decisions on, that's what bogs me down. I get paralyzed by all these decisions that need to be made, and it just seems to be overwhelming. So it's best to knock these things in the head as they come along, make decisions, move on, course correct as you need to, but always keep the list of open issues and decisions that you need to make trimmed down. Work through these things as they come up so you don't get paralyzed, you don't get bogged down and overwhelmed by the sheer number of decisions that need to be made. So that is the end of our list of 10 keys to decision making. I hope that helps you. If you have any questions, you got any feedback, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email at todd@constructionleadingedge.com. Go to the website at constructionleadingedge.com. We've got some other podcasts and articles there as well I think will help you out. If you're on Twitter, hit me at ConLeadEdge. ConLeadEdge on Twitter. Love to hear from you. Go to iTunes and subscribe to the podcast. If you would, show me some love. Leave a rating, maybe a review on iTunes. I've got a short link for that at constructionleadingedge.com/iTunes. Hope this helped you out. Let me know how I can help you guys. Have a great day.